People, it seems that I just can't get away from talking about Heathrow Airport. I've talked about the Piccadilly line, the Heathrow Express, the Elizabeth line, Heathrow Connect, even the 1960s scheme for a rail connection from Feltham. But I discovered two more plans to give Heathrow a rail link, and these were madder than anything you've seen so far. Both of them were monorails. Now, monorails are one of those things that always seems to be the future, but never the present. Well, at least in Europe and America. I understand they're reasonably popular in Asia. There are various reasons why they never took off over here. The main problem is that we don't really have any monorails. I know that sounds like circular reasoning, and in a sense it is, but let me explain a bit further. We don't have monorails, so we'd be starting from scratch. We'd need to train people from scratch. We'd need to either import parts or build a facility that can manufacture them. There's no relevant experience in this country to draw upon. So building and running a monorail would be very expensive. Meanwhile, we have transport modes like light rail and trams that fulfill much the same purpose. So monorails in Britain remain a novelty, despite the concept dating back to the early 19th century, but that hasn't stopped people from trying to make them a thing. Heathrow Airport was opened to the public in 1946, and as I've said in previous videos, it was quickly realised that it was going to need a rail link if passenger numbers kept going up. Now, in the post-war era, there was a certain amount of disdain for conventional railways, which is perhaps why unconventional solutions appeared so quickly. Enter George Benny. Benny had invented something that he called the railplane. This was a kind of rail car suspended from an overhead rail, powered by a propeller on the front and braked by a propeller on the back. Technically it wasn't a monorail in the strict sense, because it had a guide rail below, but bi-rail just sounds like a weird way of saying ordinary train. It also wasn't a plane either, but the little wings on the side intended to give the carriage a bit of lift and thus reduce friction on the rails were scrapped in development. Benny built a prototype in 1929 that ran along a stretch of track in Milngavie near Glasgow. His track was suspended above the railway. He didn't view it as a replacement for conventional railways, but as a complement. The railplane would provide high-speed services at up to 120 miles per hour, while slower trains would use the normal tracks, as usual. By all accounts, the trial was fairly successful and certainly got a lot of interest from around the world. But not enough to get the investment Benny needed, and in 1937 he was declared bankrupt. He never seems to have lost hope, and in 1946 he founded a company known as the George Benny Airspeed Railway Limited, with the specific intention of building lines to connect city centres with out-of-town airports. Heathrow was the perfect candidate, and Benny put his proposal forward in 1951. This artist's impression shows the carriage zooming along Oxford Street, but it would probably have taken the same route as the more conventional 1960s proposal. That is, follow the main line from Victoria to Clapham Junction, switch to the Reading line, leave the main line at Feltham, and zoom off to the airport from there. Yes, I have used this map before. I don't know how in-depth the planning on this line got, but it was never built. Nor were any of Benny's schemes, and he died penniless in 1957. The following year, another scheme was proposed under the name of Air Rail. This we know a little more about. It would definitely have followed the Victoria, Clapham Junction, Feltham, Heathrow route, and it would have had two sets of wheels. One set would have straddled the concrete beam that supported the carriage, propelling the vehicle along at speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour. The other would come into its own once the carriage reached the airport. Once there, the carriage would leave the rail and motor around the airport like a conventional bus, on the second set of wheels. The whole thing was to be privately funded. Air Rail Limited claimed that their technology would cost a mere 1/6 the price of a conventional railway and 1/10 the price of an underground railway. Both of these proposals promised the same thing: high-speed transport, far faster than conventional rail or the buses then in use to get people from central London to the airport. But it seems to me that both of them had the same problem: low capacity. A Piccadilly line train can carry 684 people. Both of these monorails were proposed to carry around 50 people per carriage, with each train consisting of a single carriage. There was no way that either of these were going to be able to handle the number of passengers that Heathrow would have in the coming years, even if they were built. In Hansard, for the 18th of June 1958, it's intriguingly stated that there were 3 monorail proposals. Assuming one was air rail, and assuming that the Benny scheme was dead in the water, with Benny being dead in the ground, it raises the question of what the other 2 were. The MP in question complains that he's waiting on reports on the monorails, so evidently things weren't very far advanced then. Regardless, by the 23rd of February 1961, the monorail concept is being spoken of dismissively, seemingly indicating that it was abandoned at this point. We learn that whatever proposal was under discussion would have cost twice as much as a conventional railway. So much for air rail's confident estimates. But they consider that isn't quite so pie in the sky as the idea of a tube line which would cost 6 times as much. No, conclude our friends in the House of Commons, the future of airport transport links almost certainly lay in jet-powered helicopters. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do leave a like, and you may wish to subscribe for more if that's your jam. I would like, as always, to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the propeller to my railplane. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.